The morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling countryside estate as Princess Elena adjusted her casual riding jacket, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Today marked her first public appearance since marrying Prince Alexander 6 months ago, and she desperately wanted everything to go perfectly. The children's charity event at Willowbrook Farm was supposed to be simple: meet some families, pet a few animals, and show the public that the royal couple truly cared about their community. Alexander squeezed her hand gently as their black sedan pulled through the farm's rustic wooden gates. "You'll be wonderful," he whispered, his warm brown eyes crinkling with encouragement. "Just be yourself." Elena nodded, though her palms remained damp with nervousness. Being herself had gotten her into trouble before. Her spontaneous laugh during serious ceremonies, her tendency to kick off her heels when no one was looking, her habit of making funny faces at crying babies to cheer them up. These quirks had charmed Alexander, but horrified the royal protocol officers. The car stopped beside a red barn decorated with colorful bunting and balloons. Through the window, Elena could see dozens of families with children of all ages gathered around various farm animals. A small stage had been set up near the main paddock, where she and Alexander were scheduled to give a brief speech about the importance of connecting children with nature. As they stepped out of the car, the crowd erupted in polite applause. Elena waved gracefully, her auburn hair catching the sunlight as a gentle breeze swept across the farm. She wore a simple navy dress with comfortable flats, a compromise between royal dignity and practical farm wear. Margaret Thornfield, the farm's owner and charity coordinator, hurried over to greet them. She was a sturdy woman in her 50s with kind eyes and soil under her fingernails. "Your Royal Highnesses, welcome to Willowbrook. The children are absolutely thrilled you're here." Elena's nervousness began to ease as she watched the children's excited faces. Some hid shyly behind their parents, while others jumped up and down, trying to get a better view of the real-life princess and prince. "We're delighted to be here," Elena replied warmly. "What a beautiful place you've created for these families." As Margaret led them toward the main group, Elena noticed a small paddock off to the side where a chestnut pony stood alone, stamping his hooves and tossing his head irritably. The pony was clearly agitated, his ears pinned back and his tail swishing with annoyance. "That's Chester," Margaret explained, following Elena's gaze. "He's usually our gentlest pony, but he's been rather moody today. We decided to keep him separate from the children for safety." Alexander was already engaged in conversation with a group of local officials, but Elena found herself drawn to the troubled pony. She had always had a way with animals, much to her mother's dismay. As a child, she had collected injured birds, befriended stray cats, and once brought a lost goat home from the park. "Would it be all right if I said hello to him?" Elena asked. Margaret looked uncertain. "Well, I suppose, but please be careful, Your Highness. He nipped at one of our handlers earlier." Elena approached the paddock fence slowly, speaking in a soft, soothing voice. "Hello there, Chester. Having a rough day, are you?" The pony's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, and he turned to regard her with large, dark eyes that seemed almost human in their expressiveness. Elena could see he was beautiful, but clearly distressed about something. Behind her, she heard Alexander wrapping up his conversation with the officials. Soon they would need to begin the formal part of their visit, the speeches, the photo opportunities, the carefully orchestrated interactions with selected families. But for this moment, Elena found herself captivated by Chester's obvious distress. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a packet of mints she always carried. Not the sugar-free kind the royal nutritionist insisted on, but real peppermint her grandmother had given her as a child. Elena had kept up the habit as a small rebellion against the endless rules that now governed her life. "Would you like a treat, Chester?" she whispered, unwrapping a mint. The pony's nostrils flared as he caught the scent. He took a cautious step toward the fence, then another. Elena remained perfectly still, holding the mint on her flat palm, just as her grandmother had taught her years ago. "Elena." Alexander's voice came from behind her. "They're ready for us to begin the ceremony." She turned to smile at her husband, the mint still in her outstretched hand. Just a moment. I think Chester and I are becoming friends. As she turned back to the pony, several things happened at once. Chester, perhaps startled by Alexander's voice or motivated by his desire for the mint, lunged forward more aggressively than Elena had expected. His teeth, aimed for the treat, instead clamped down on the fabric of her sleeve. Elena gasped in surprise, not from pain, but from the sudden tug as Chester pulled at her jacket. The movement caught her off guard, and she stumbled slightly, her free hand reaching for the fence post to steady herself. The mint flew from her palm, landing in the dirt. What happened next would be replayed on news channels around the world and spawn countless internet memes. As Elena tried to gently extract her sleeve from Chester's determined grip, the absurdity of the situation struck her. Here she was, a princess of the realm, engaged in a gentle tug-of-war with a stubborn pony while dozens of families and news cameras watched. A small giggle escaped her lips. Then another. Soon she was laughing helplessly as Chester continued to worry at her sleeve like a dog with a favorite toy, completely oblivious to the chaos he was causing. Alexander rushed to her aid, as did Margaret and several farm hands, but Elena waved them off with her free hand, still laughing. "He's not hurting me," she managed between giggles. "I think he just really wants that mint." The crowd had fallen silent, unsure whether to be concerned or amused. The photographer's cameras clicked frantically, capturing every moment of the unusual scene. This was definitely not in the official program. Chester finally released her sleeve and looked up at Elena with what could only be described as an indignant expression, as if to say, "Where's my treat?" His ears were still pinned back, and he pawed the ground in frustration. Elena's laughter proved contagious. First one child in the crowd began to giggle, then another. Soon the entire gathering was chuckling at the sight of their elegant princess being gently attacked by a cranky pony. Even Alexander couldn't suppress his grin as he watched his wife's infectious joy spread through the crowd. This was exactly why he had fallen in love with her. Her ability to find humor and humanity in any situation. Margaret approached with a proper horse treat in her hand. "Perhaps this would be more suitable, Your Highness?" Elena accepted the treat gratefully, her cheeks flushed with laughter and embarrassment. "Thank you. I should have asked first." She offered the treat to Chester, who accepted it graciously, his mood visibly improving as he crunched the sweet oat biscuit. As the crowd's laughter died down, Elena realized that something had shifted. The formal distance between the royal couple and the families had disappeared. Children were now pressing closer to the fence, eager to meet both the princess and the notorious Chester. "Can we pet him now?" asked a brave little girl with pigtails. Elena looked at Margaret, who nodded with a smile. "I think Chester's feeling much better now." As Elena gently stroked Chester's neck, she caught Alexander's eye. He was watching her with a mixture of admiration and love that made her heart flutter just as it had on their first date. "Ready for that speech?" he asked quietly. Elena glanced around at the expectant faces, children eager to meet the animals, parents smiling at their royal visitors' unexpected humanity, photographers already uploading photos that would make tomorrow's front pages. "Actually," she said, her eyes twinkling with mischief, "I think we might want to skip the formal speech and just spend time with everyone. What do you think?" Alexander's answering smile told her everything she needed to know. Sometimes the best moments couldn't be planned or scripted. Sometimes you just had to let a stubborn pony lead the way. What followed was unlike any royal visit in recent memory. Instead of the carefully choreographed meet-and-greet that had been planned, Elena and Alexander found themselves genuinely mingling with families, their formal schedule completely abandoned. The photographers, initially frustrated by the deviation from protocol, quickly realized they were capturing something far more valuable than standard royal portraits. Elena discovered that Chester's earlier aggression had a perfectly reasonable explanation. Tommy Hartwell, a 7-year-old with bright red hair and freckles, shyly explained that Chester had been his special friend during previous visits to the farm. "He misses me when I'm not here," Tommy said solemnly. Mom says he gets grumpy waiting for us to come back. The boy had been in the hospital for several weeks following surgery, and this was his first visit back to Willowbrook Farm. Chester, it seemed, had been expressing his displeasure at his young friend's extended absence in the only way he knew how. "Would you like to help me give Chester another treat?" Elena asked, crouching down to Tommy's level. The boy's face lit up with pure joy. As Elena watched Tommy gently feed Chester, she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. This was why she had married into the royal family. Not for the titles or the palaces, but for the opportunity to make real connections with people. Alexander had wandered over to a group of teenagers who were initially trying to look too cool to be excited about meeting royalty. Within minutes, however, he had them laughing as he attempted to milk a very patient cow named Buttercup under their instruction. His technique was terrible, but his willingness to look foolish in front of cameras endeared him to the young people immediately. "You're not very good at this, are you?" commented 15-year-old Sarah, grinning as she demonstrated proper milking technique. "Absolutely hopeless," Alexander agreed cheerfully. "I can navigate complex international trade negotiations, but apparently farm animals are beyond my expertise." Elena watched her husband with growing admiration. Away from the formal constraints of palace life, his natural warmth and humor shone through. She had fallen in love with this version of him, the man who could laugh at himself and connect with people from all walks of life. Margaret Thornfield approached Elena with a cup of fresh apple cider and a concerned expression. "Your Highness, I do apologize for Chester's behavior earlier, and for how the day has, well, completely deviated from what we planned." Elena accepted the cider gratefully and took a sip of the sweet, spiced liquid. "Margaret, this is perfect. This is exactly what we hoped for when we decided to visit. But your speech, the formal presentations, the photo opportunities we arranged, will happen at the next event," Elena finished gently. "Today we're just Elena and Alexander meeting new friends." As if summoned by her words, a small voice piped up from behind them. "Princess Elena, Chester wants to show you something." Elena turned to see Tommy holding Chester's lead rope. The pony was no longer the agitated animal from earlier, but had transformed into a gentle, patient companion. His ears were forward, his head held high with pride as he allowed the small boy to lead him. "What does he want to show me?" Elena asked seriously, treating Tommy's announcement with the gravity it deserved. "His favorite scratching post. He gets really itchy behind his ears, and there's a special fence post that's just the right height." Elena found herself being led around the farm by a 7-year-old and a pony, her royal security detail, trailing at a discreet distance. The scratching post turned out to be a weathered wooden fence post that Chester approached with obvious anticipation. "Watch this," Tommy said with the enthusiasm of a child sharing a treasured secret. "Chester, show her the thing." Chester positioned himself just so against the post and began rubbing his neck and head against the wood with an expression of pure bliss. His eyes half closed, his lower lip drooping slightly, he looked absolutely ridiculous and completely content. Elena burst into delighted laughter again. "He looks like he's at a spa. Mom says he's the most vain pony she's ever seen," Tommy confided. "He spends ages getting his mane just right after scratching." As if he understood the conversation, Chester moved away from the post and shook his head vigorously, his chestnut mane flowing dramatically in the breeze. He then turned to look at Elena and Tommy as if seeking their approval for his appearance. "Very handsome, Chester," Elena said solemnly, causing Tommy to giggle. Word of the relaxed royal visit had somehow spread beyond the farm. Elena noticed several cars pulling into the parking area. Neighbors and locals who had heard that the prince and princess were actually staying longer than scheduled and interacting freely with visitors. Among the newcomers was Mrs. Dorothy Ashworth, an elderly woman who had taught at the local primary school for 40 years before retiring. She approached Elena with the confidence of someone who had spent decades managing children and wasn't particularly intimidated by titles. "Your Highness," she said with a slight curtsy, I wanted to thank you for what you've done today. What do you mean? My grandson Jack has been terrified of horses since a riding accident last year. But watching you laugh while Chester grabbed your sleeve. Well, he's been asking if he can pet the pony. Elena looked around and spotted a boy of about 10 hanging back near the fence, watching the interaction between Tommy and Chester with obvious longing mixed with fear. Would you like me to introduce him to Chester? Elena offered. Oh, would you? His mother's been trying for months to get him near horses again. What followed was one of the most rewarding hours of Elena's life. Working with Tommy as Chester's official spokesperson and Mrs. Ashworth as encouragement, Elena slowly helped Jack overcome his fear. The breakthrough came when Chester, with his uncanny ability to sense emotions, gently nuzzled Jack's shoulder and then stood perfectly still while the boy stroked his neck with trembling hands. He's so soft, Jack whispered in wonder. And he's a very good judge of character, Elena replied quietly. Chester only let special people touch his neck. By late afternoon, the farm had turned into an impromptu community celebration. Alexander had organized an informal football match with some of the older children, while Elena found herself officiating a contest to see who could braid the most creative pattern into Chester's mane. The pony stood patiently as child after child tried their hand at hairdressing, seeming to enjoy being the center of attention. The royal security team, initially nervous about the unscripted nature of the visit, had relaxed as they realized the genuine warmth of the community. Even the photographers had stopped treating it as a formal event and were capturing candid moments of joy and connection. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, Margaret approached Elena and Alexander with obvious reluctance. Your Highnesses, I hate to interrupt, but your security team has reminded me that you have an evening engagement. Elena glanced at her watch and was startled to realize they had been at the farm for over 4 hours, 3 hours longer than originally planned. The evening engagement was a formal dinner with foreign dignitaries, the kind of event that required careful preparation and couldn't be postponed. Of course, she said, though she couldn't hide her disappointment. We should go. The goodbye process took another 30 minutes as Elena and Alexander made their way around the farm, personally thanking each family they had met. Tommy presented Elena with a hand-picked bouquet of wildflowers for Chester, and Jack shyly asked if he could write letters to the pony. I think Chester would love that, Elena assured him, and perhaps you could visit him again soon? As their car pulled away from Willowbrook Farm, Elena waved through the rear window at the crowd that had gathered to see them off. Chester stood at the fence, his freshly braided mane adorned with small flowers that the children had woven through the plaits. That was... Alexander began, then trailed off, searching for words. Perfect, Elena finished. Completely unplanned and absolutely perfect. Alexander reached for her hand. The palace staff is going to have a heart attack when they see the news coverage. Elena grinned mischievously. Good. Maybe they'll realize that people want to see us as human beings, not just royal figures. As they drove through the countryside toward their evening obligations, both Elena and Alexander were already planning their return visit to Willowbrook Farm. They had discovered something valuable that day, the joy of genuine connection, facilitated by one very opinionated pony with excellent timing. Behind them, Chester continued to hold court at the fence, accepting treats and admiration from the lingering visitors with the dignity of someone who knew he had orchestrated something special. The black sedan had barely pulled through the palace gates before Elena's phone began buzzing with messages. Alexander's expression grew increasingly concerned as he scrolled through news alerts on his own device, his jaw tightening with each headline. Princess Elena and pony attack drama, he read aloud grimly. Royal security breach at farm visit. Princess laughs during animal assault. Elena felt her stomach drop as she realized how the media had twisted their wonderful afternoon. Assault? Attack? Chester was just being playful. I know that, and you know that, Alexander said carefully, but apparently the story has already gone viral. There are videos everywhere, and the palace press office is in crisis mode. Their car swept up the curved driveway toward Kensington Palace, where Elena could already see an unusual amount of activity. Staff members hurried across the courtyard, and several official-looking vehicles were parked near the main entrance. "Your Royal Highnesses," their driver announced through the intercom, "Sir Reginald asked me to inform you that he needs to see you immediately upon your arrival." Elena's heart sank further. Sir Reginald Thornberry was the palace's chief communications director, a stern man in his 60s who took royal protocol more seriously than most people took their religion. If he was waiting for them personally, the situation was serious. As they entered the palace, Elena caught sight of herself in the grand mirror that dominated the entrance hall. Her hair was windswept. Her navy dress had suspicious white stains that might have been from Chester's enthusiastic nuzzling, and there were grass stains on her knees from kneeling to talk with children. She looked like she had spent the day at a farm, which of course she had. "Elena, Alexander, thank goodness you're back." Sir Reginald materialized as if from thin air, his usually impeccable appearance showing signs of stress. His tie was slightly askew, and his silver hair looked as though he had been running his hands through it. "Reginald," Alexander began, "I assume this is about the farm visit." The farm visit that lasted 4 hours instead of 90 minutes resulted in no formal speeches, completely ignored the planned itinerary, and produced dozens of unauthorized photographs and videos. Sir Reginald's voice climbed steadily in pitch. "Yes, it's about the farm visit." Elena felt a flash of defiance. "We met wonderful people connected with children and had exactly the kind of authentic interaction the public claims they want from the royal family." "Princess Elena," Sir Reginald said with the patience of someone explaining something to a particularly slow child, "there's a difference between authentic interaction and chaos. The protocols exist for your protection and for the dignity of the crown." He gestured for them to follow him toward his office, where Elena could see staff members frantically working at computers, phones pressed to their ears. The communications department looked like a war room. "Show them the headlines," Sir Reginald instructed his assistant, a nervous young woman named Patricia, who immediately pulled up several news websites on the large screen that dominated one wall. The headlines were worse than Alexander had indicated. "Princess Elena's farm fiasco, royal visit turns to chaos, security concerns after princess mobbed by animals." But it was the photographs that made Elena's breath catch. There she was, laughing helplessly as Chester tugged at her sleeve, her hair coming loose from its careful styling, her face flushed with mirth. In the photos, without the context of the joyful atmosphere and Chester's harmless intentions, it did look rather dramatic. "The video is even worse," Patricia said hesitantly, clicking on news clip. Elena watched herself on screen and had to admit that the footage was startling. Chester's lunge toward her hand had been captured from an angle that made it look aggressive, and her surprised gasp had been amplified by the microphone. The footage cut off just before her laughter began, ending instead with a close-up of Chester's teeth near her arm. "This makes it look like Chester was actually trying to hurt me," Elena said quietly. "Exactly," Sir Reginald replied. "And now we have animal rights groups calling for better protection of royal visitors, security experts questioning why you were allowed near an aggressive animal, and various pundits debating whether this incident shows that the royal family is too casual about their safety." Alexander moved closer to Elena, his hand finding hers. "But surely when people see the full context, the longer videos that show Elena laughing and the children playing, social media doesn't work that way, Your Highness," Patricia explained gently. "The shorter, more dramatic clips get shared more widely. The hashtag #Ponygate is already trending, and most people are only seeing the edited version." Elena sank into one of the leather chairs facing Sir Reginald's desk. "What about all the positive interactions? Tommy and Chester's friendship, Jack overcoming his fear of horses, the genuine connections we made." "Those stories are being overshadowed," Sir Reginald admitted. "Though I will say, some of the coverage has been positive. The local news station interviewed several families, and their reports were quite favorable." He clicked to a different website, where Elena was relieved to see a much more accurate headline. Princess Elena brings joy to local farm. The accompanying article featured quotes from Margaret Thornfield, Tommy's mother, and Mrs. Ashworth, all speaking glowingly about the royal visit. The problem, Sir Reginald continued, is that positive local news doesn't spread as quickly as dramatic footage. We're fighting an uphill battle to control the narrative. Elena looked around the room at the stressed faces of the communications team. What do you need us to do? For now, nothing, Sir Reginald said firmly. No public statements, no social media posts, no attempts to correct the record. We're going to let this blow over naturally while we work behind the scenes to ensure more balanced coverage. You want us to hide, Elena said flatly. I want you to be strategic, Sir Reginald corrected. Sometimes the best response to a media storm is to wait for the next story to capture public attention. Alexander frowned. That feels like we're abandoning all the people we met today. They saw what really happened. They know the truth. The people who were there know the truth, Sir Reginald agreed. But there are millions of people who weren't there, and their perception is what we need to manage. Elena felt a growing frustration building in her chest. So we just let everyone believe that Chester attacked me? Let people think that Willowbrook Farm is unsafe? Let Tommy and Jack and all those families feel like their experience didn't matter? Princess Elena, you must understand. No, Elena interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. I understand that this is your job, and I respect your expertise. But I also understand that we had a genuine, positive impact today. Children who were afraid of animals found courage. Families who felt disconnected from the royal family felt heard and valued. And we showed that we're human beings who can laugh at ourselves and connect with our community. Sir Reginald's expression softened slightly. Your intentions were excellent, Your Highness. But intentions don't control media narratives. Elena stood up, her decision crystallizing. Then, maybe it's time we learn to control our own narrative. What do you mean? Alexander asked, though Elena could see in his eyes that he was beginning to understand her thinking. I mean, maybe it's time we stopped letting other people tell our story for us. Maybe it's time we showed people who we really are, instead of hiding behind protocols and hoping for the best. Sir Reginald looked alarmed. Your Highness, any public response right now would only add fuel to the fire. The standard protocol has clearly failed, Elena finished. Look around this room, Reginald. Your entire team is in crisis mode because we spent an afternoon being genuine with people. Something is wrong with that picture. She turned to Alexander, who was watching her with growing admiration. What do you think? Alexander's smile was answer enough. I think, he said slowly, that Princess Elena might have a point. What did you have in mind? Elena felt a rush of excitement and terror in equal measure. What she had in mind would either vindicate their approach to royal duties or create an even bigger scandal. But after watching the joy on Tommy's face, the courage in Jack's eyes, and the genuine warmth of the families they had met, she knew she had to try. I think we need to go back to Willowbrook Farm, she said, and this time we tell our own story. The room fell silent except for the clicking of keyboards and the buzz of phones. Sir Reginald looked like he might faint. Patricia clutched her tablet as if it were a life preserver, and Alexander looked like he was falling in love with his wife all over again. That, he said quietly, is either brilliant or insane. Elena grinned, feeling more like herself than she had in months. Maybe both. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching Sir Reginald's mood perfectly as he paced around the palace communications center. Elena's plan, which had seemed audacious the night before, now felt like professional suicide in the harsh light of day. Your Highnesses, he said carefully, I've spent the night thinking about your proposal, and while I admire your creativity, I really must advise against it. Elena, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater that would have horrified the protocol office, remained unmoved. What's the worst that could happen, Reginald? The media criticizes us? They're already doing that. People question our judgment. They're already doing that too. But if you return to the farm and something goes wrong again, then we'll handle it, Alexander interjected, surprising everyone, including himself, with his certainty. Elena's right. We're spending so much energy trying to control how people perceive us that we've forgotten to actually be ourselves. Patricia, who had been quietly working at her computer, looked up nervously. Your Highnesses, the overnight polling numbers might interest you. She pulled up a series of charts on the main screen. While the initial media coverage was negative, public sentiment is more mixed than we expected. 43% of respondents said they found the princess's reaction charming and relatable, while 31% called it undignified. The rest were undecided. Elena studied the numbers with growing confidence. So nearly half the public actually liked what they saw. More interestingly, Patricia continued, among respondents under 35, 67% had a positive reaction. They specifically mentioned liking that you seemed real and down to earth. Sir Reginald rubbed his temples. Demographics aside, returning to the scene of yesterday's incident sends the wrong message. It suggests we're either tone-deaf to public criticism or deliberately courting controversy. Or, Elena said firmly, it suggests we're confident in our actions and committed to the people we met. She had spent half the night reading online comments and watching the various video clips that had circulated. Yes, some people were critical, but many others were defending her, sharing their own stories about difficult animals, and praising her for showing genuine emotion instead of royal reserve. I've made a decision, Elena announced. I'm going back to Willowbrook Farm this afternoon. Not for an official royal visit, but as myself. I want to check on Chester, see how Tommy and Jack are doing, and set the record straight about what really happened. Absolutely not, Sir Reginald said immediately. The security implications alone will be manageable, Alexander interrupted. I've already spoken with the head of security. A small, discreet detail can handle an informal visit. Sir Reginald stared at Alexander in betrayal. You're supporting this madness? I'm supporting my wife, Alexander said quietly. And I'm supporting the idea that sometimes doing the right thing matters more than managing perception. Elena felt a surge of gratitude toward her husband. They had talked long into the night about the risks and benefits of returning to the farm. Alexander had initially been cautious, but as they discussed the genuine connections they had made and the misrepresentation of those interactions in the media, he had become increasingly convinced that Elena's instincts were correct. There's something else, Elena said, pulling out her phone. I've been in contact with Margaret Thornfield this morning. Sir Reginald looked like he might hyperventilate. You called the farm directly? Without clearing it through the press office. I texted her, Elena corrected, as one woman to another, asking how Chester was doing and whether Tommy had recovered from all the excitement. She showed them Margaret's response. Chester is perfectly fine, but definitely missing the attention. Tommy hasn't stopped talking about meeting you. And Jack asked if he could come back next weekend to visit Chester again. Thank you for giving our community such a wonderful day. Don't you see? Elena asked. The real story isn't about a pony attacking a princess. It's about connections made, fears overcome, and joy shared. But that story is being lost in all the manufactured drama. Patricia cleared her throat hesitantly. Your Highness, there is one other consideration. Some of the social media reaction has been quite supportive. The hashtag Team Chester has started trending, with people sharing their own funny animal stories and praising you for being a good sport. She pulled up a selection of tweets and posts. Finally, a royal who acts like a real person. Read one. Princess Elena handled that better than I would have. Read another. Chester for Prime Minister. He's got excellent judgment. Joked a third. Elena smiled at the last one. See? People aren't as fragile as we think they are. They can handle seeing royalty be human. Your Highness, Sir Reginald tried one last time. Even if public sentiment is mixed, returning to the farm looks reactive. It suggests we're being driven by media coverage rather than principled decision-making. Then, we make it clear that we're not being reactive, Elena said. We're being proactive. We're taking control of our own story instead of letting others tell it for us. She had been thinking about this all night. The traditional approach to royal public relations seemed designed to make the royal family appear perfect but distant. Elena wanted to try something different, to be accessible without being undignified, genuine without being inappropriate. "What exactly do you propose to do at the farm?" Alexander asked, though his tone suggested he was already prepared to support whatever she decided. "I want to spend time with Chester and show people that there's nothing to fear. I want to visit with Tommy and Jack and the other children we met. And I want to have an honest conversation with a few journalists about what really happened and why it mattered." Sir Reginald sat down heavily in his chair. "You want to hold an impromptu press conference at a farm, with a potentially aggressive pony as a backdrop." "Chester isn't aggressive," Elena said patiently. "He's playful and a bit greedy for treats. Any horse person would recognize that immediately. The problem is that the story is being told by people who don't understand horses. So we invite some equestrian journalists," Alexander suggested, getting into the spirit of Elena's plan. "People who can provide proper context about horse behavior." Elena's eyes lit up. "Exactly. And we invite the families from yesterday, so journalists can hear directly from Tommy and Jack about their experiences." Patricia, who had been following the conversation with growing excitement, looked up from her computer. "Your Highnesses, I think this could actually work. But we need to be very careful about the messaging." "What kind of messaging?" Elena asked. "We position it not as damage control, but as a follow-up visit. Princess Elena was so moved by the children she met that she wanted to return and continue building those relationships. The focus is on your commitment to the community, not on defending your actions." Sir Reginald looked thoughtful for the first time all morning. "That's actually not terrible messaging. And if Chester misbehaves again?" Alexander asked with a grin. Elena's answering smile was pure mischief. "Then we laugh again, and we show people that sometimes the best moments in life are the unplanned ones." 3 hours later, Elena found herself back at Willowbrook Farm. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of a crowd of families enjoying a casual royal visit, there were news vans, photographers, and a carefully selected group of journalists who had been briefed on proper horse behavior. Margaret Thornfield met them at the gate, looking nervous but determined. "Your Highness, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming back. Some of the media coverage made it sound like Chester was dangerous, and we've had several booking cancellations." Elena's jaw tightened. "That's exactly why I needed to come back. Where's Chester now?" "In his paddock, wondering where all his new admirers went," Margaret said with a smile. "Tommy's here too, with his parents. They wanted to support you." As they walked toward Chester's paddock, Elena could hear the click and whir of cameras behind them. This time, she was ready. This time, she would control the narrative. Chester saw them coming and trotted over to the fence with obvious excitement, his earlier agitation completely gone. He looked like exactly what he was, a friendly, curious pony hoping for attention and treats. "Hello again, Chester," Elena said warmly, producing a proper horse treat from her pocket. "Ready to show everyone what a gentleman you can be?" Chester accepted the treat politely, then nuzzled Elena's hand hopefully for more. When she laughed and scratched behind his ears, he leaned into the attention with obvious pleasure. The cameras captured every moment, but this time Elena was prepared for them. This time, the story would be told properly. 6 months later, Elena sat in the same Palace Communication Center that had been in chaos after the Chester incident, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. The walls were decorated with framed photographs from various royal visits, and prominent among them was a picture of Elena laughing as Chester tugged at her sleeve, with Tommy and Jack grinning in the background. "The quarterly approval ratings are in," Patricia announced, barely able to contain her excitement as she pulled up the latest polling data. Princess Elena's approval rating has reached 78%, the highest for any royal family member in over a decade. Sir Reginald, who had initially aged 5 years during the Chester crisis, now looked positively rejuvenated. The authentic royalty approach appears to be resonating strongly with the public, he admitted, though Elena could tell it pained him slightly to acknowledge that abandoning protocol had been the right choice. The return visit to Willowbrook Farm had been a turning point, not just for Elena's public image, but for her understanding of her role as a royal. The carefully orchestrated press conference had allowed her to tell the real story of her first visit, and the presence of equestrian experts had provided proper context for Chester's behavior. He was displaying classic food-seeking behavior. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an equine behaviorist, had explained to the assembled journalists. Ponies are naturally curious and opportunistic. Chester's actions were completely normal and non-aggressive. In fact, his willingness to approach Princess Elena showed remarkable trust. But the real triumph had been watching Tommy and Jack interact with Chester while the cameras rolled. Tommy's obvious affection for the pony, and Jack's tentative but growing confidence around horses, had provided powerful visual evidence that there had never been any real danger. "Chester's my best friend," Tommy had told the BBC reporter solemnly. "He was just saying hello to Princess Elena the way he says hello to me. Sometimes he's a bit grabby with treats, but he's never mean." The coverage that followed had been overwhelmingly positive. Instead of focusing on perceived danger or protocol violations, the media had embraced the story of genuine human connection and Elena's willingness to return and set the record straight. More importantly, the incident had sparked a broader conversation about authenticity in public life. Elena had received hundreds of letters from people sharing their own experiences with difficult animals, awkward moments in public, and the pressure to appear perfect at all times. "Your Highness," Patricia continued, clicking to another screen, "the Willowbrook Farm visit has become something of a template for royal engagement. The palace has received over 200 invitations from community organizations requesting similar, authentic visits." Elena smiled, remembering the afternoon just last week when she and Alexander had spent 4 unscripted hours at an inner-city youth center playing basketball, helping with homework, and sharing pizza with teenagers who initially couldn't believe that actual royalty would sit on the floor and eat with their hands. "Any word from Chester?" Alexander asked, joining the conversation as he entered the communications center. "Actually, yes," Elena said, pulling up the Willowbrook Farm Instagram account on her phone. "Margaret's been documenting his rise to fame. He now has his own social media following and has been invited to appear at 3 different county fairs." The photo she showed them featured Chester wearing a small banner that read, "Royal Appointment by Princess Elena," while a queue of children waited to meet him. His expression was one of supreme satisfaction, as if he had always known he was destined for greatness. "Tommy's become his unofficial PR manager," Elena continued. "Apparently he's very serious about making sure visitors understand Chester's rules. No sudden movements, treats must be offered on flat palms, and everyone must tell Chester he's handsome before they leave. That boy has a future in communications," Sir Reginald said with amusement. The success of Elena's more authentic approach to royal duties had surprised everyone, including Elena herself. She had expected some positive response, but the overwhelming public enthusiasm for royalty that acted like real people had been beyond her wildest hopes. More than that, the change had affected how she felt about her role. Instead of feeling constrained by expectations and protocol, she had begun to see her position as an opportunity to make genuine connections and create positive change. "There's something else," Alexander said, settling into a chair beside Elena. "I just got off the phone with the Prime Minister. The visit to Chester has apparently inspired a new government initiative." "What kind of initiative?" Elena asked, intrigued. "They're calling it Authentic Engagement, a program encouraging all government officials to spend unscripted time with the communities they serve. Apparently, your willingness to throw out the formal schedule and just talk to people has sparked some serious conversations about accessibility in public service." Elena felt a flutter of pride mixed with amazement. It seemed almost impossible that one playful pony's quest for a mint could have led to broader social change. But stranger things had happened. "Speaking of Chester," Sir Reginald said, pulling up a new document on his computer, "we've received a rather unusual request." "Oh no," Elena said, though she was smiling. "What has he done now?" It's not what he's done, it's what he's been asked to do. The Lord Mayor of London has invited Chester to be the honorary Grand Marshal of the annual Children's Parade next month. Elena burst into laughter. Chester as Grand Marshal? Does he know about this honor? Margaret says he's very excited about the prospect, especially since it apparently involves wearing a special ceremonial halter and receiving treats from admiring crowds. Alexander shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, we thought a pony grabbing your sleeve was going to be a public relations disaster. Now that same pony is being honored by the Lord Mayor of London. It just goes to show, Elena said thoughtfully, that sometimes the things we think are problems are actually opportunities in disguise. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Margaret. Chester's asking when you're coming for your next visit. Also, Tommy wants to know if you'd like to see the obstacle course he's built for Chester. Fair warning, it involves a lot of jumping, and Chester thinks he's a racehorse. Elena showed the message to Alexander, who grinned. How does next Tuesday sound? We can make it part of our community outreach schedule. No photographers this time, Elena said firmly. Just us, Chester, Tommy, and whoever else wants to hang around and watch a pony show off. Sir Reginald looked up from his computer. Your Highnesses, while I support this continued relationship with Willowbrook Farm, perhaps we could arrange for just a small photography presence? The public does enjoy seeing Reginald, Elena interrupted gently. Sometimes the best moments are the ones that don't get photographed. Sometimes authenticity means doing things just because they matter to us, not because they'll look good in the papers. Sir Reginald nodded slowly. Your Highness, 6 months ago, I would have argued with that statement. Now, I think you might be onto something. As the meeting wound down and the communications team dispersed to their various tasks, Elena found herself looking out the window at the palace gardens. 6 months ago, she had felt trapped by expectations and protocol, unsure of how to be both a princess and herself. One curious pony had changed all of that. Chester's playful grab for a mint had become a catalyst for Elena to embrace authenticity over perfection, connection over protocol, and genuine engagement over carefully managed appearances. Ready to go home? Alexander asked, appearing beside her at the window. Actually, Elena said, pulling out her phone to text Margaret. I was thinking we might make a quick stop at a certain farm on the way. I have some mints in my purse, and I suspect Chester might be interested. Alexander's laugh echoed through the communications center. Lead the way, princess. Lead the way. As they left the palace, Elena reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this point. She had married into the royal family hoping to make a difference, but she had never imagined that the path to authentic connection would be shown to her by a mischievous pony with a sweet tooth. Sometimes, she thought, the best teachers come in the most unexpected packages. And sometimes, the moments that seem like disasters are actually the beginning of something wonderful. Chester was waiting by the fence when they arrived, almost as if he had been expecting them. His greeting was enthusiastic but polite. He had learned, with Tommy's patient instruction, that princesses preferred gentle nuzzling to aggressive sleeve-tugging. As Elena watched Tommy demonstrate Chester's new tricks while Jack cheered from the sidelines, she realized that this was exactly what she had hoped for when she first decided to marry Alexander. Not the grand gestures or formal ceremonies, but these quiet moments of genuine human connection. Chester, apparently deciding that enough time had been spent on tricks, approached Elena with his most charming expression and gently bumped her hand with his nose. Elena laughed, the same delighted, unguarded laugh that had started everything 6 months ago, and produced a mint from her purse. Here you go, Chester, she said, offering the treat on her flat palm. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the best way to be royal is to stop trying so hard to be perfect. Chester accepted the mint with dignity, crunched it thoughtfully, and then looked at Elena with what could only be described as approval. After all, he seemed to say, he had always known she had the potential to be truly special. She had just needed a little guidance from someone with proper perspective on what really mattered. And with that, Chester wandered off to accept admiration from his other subjects, leaving Elena and Alexander to enjoy an unscheduled, unscripted, perfectly imperfect afternoon with their friends.